we had analyzed the formation of Graafian follicle. Questions are, who produces ovum, who produces estrogen, who produces progesterone? हमने एक भी आंसर अभी तक दिया नहीं है. सर, ओवम तो कब से बन गया था? This structure here is the primary oocyte, and primary oocyte has to be released from the ovary. But sir, the primary oocyte, instead of getting released from the ovary, was first surrounded by flat cells. Then flat cells became columnar. Then columnar cells break down to form membrana, granulosa, round cells. Then some cavity called antrum develops, filled with liquor folliculi, surrounding a theca interna, surrounding a theca externa. तो ये oocyte अंदर जा रहा है या बाहर जा रहा है? Rather than going out, it is going more and more inside the follicle. तो ये इतने सारे follicles बनाने की जरूरत क्या है? All we want is the oocyte to go from inside to the outside, but how will the oocyte go out? If you remember, there is a capsule called as the tunica albuginea, and like the germinal cells cannot enter inside because of tunica albuginea, the oocyte cannot go out because there is capsule. So how will the oocyte go out? Nature ने इसकी तैयारी पहले से ही कर दी थी. First, the oocyte was surrounded by flat cells. Flat cells then became columnar. Then it breaks down to form membrana, granulosa. Then a cavity called antrum. Antrum gets filled with liquor folliculi. And as the antrum becomes wider and wider, more and more liquor folliculi fills in, and it becomes a Graafian order mature follicle. As the follicle will further enlarge, more and more liquor folliculi will enter in, and at one point in time, the Graafian follicle will swell and become so thick and so huge that it will touch the tunica albuginea. And as it touches the tunica albuginea, the follicle further enlarges. The tunica albuginea will stretch. At one point in time, it cannot stretch any further. The tunica albuginea will burst, and the oocyte will get released. समझो, आपको एक बॉइल होता है. बॉइल में पस जमा होता है, and that boil one day will burst and the pus goes out. Sir, who is that skin tunica albuginea? Who is the boil Graafian follicle? Who is the pus inside? Liquor folliculi. And as more and more liquor folliculi goes in, Graafian follicles swell, the tunica albuginea bursts, and the oocyte is released from inside to the outside. That point of rupturing is called as the stigma. So stigma is the rupture. And at that point, do we remember these are the cells called germ hill? Germ hill cells undergo rapid cell division, and germ hill cells undergo rapid cell division and push the oocyte from inside the ovary to the outside. तो ये है oocyte, ये है germ hill, and germ hill cells have divided. What is the point of rupturing called? Stigma. And through the stigma or the hole, the oocyte is pushed out by the germ hill cells, and then the germ hill cells break. And as the germ hill cells break, the oocyte will become free. And oocyte is free, and where will it fall down? Well, ovary, if you remember, is not attached to fallopian tube, so oocyte would fall down in the abdominal cavity. But no, do you remember the fimbriae will suck and push the egg into the fallopian tube? Question is, ये fimbriae को कैसे पता that ovulation has taken place and now it is time to move and suck the egg in the fallopian tube? Are the fimbriae moving all the time? No, sir. It is when the Graafian follicle ruptures. What is the fluid that will go out called liquor folliculi? And liquor folliculi have in it prostaglandins. Say, sounds familiar. If you remember, seminal fluid had in it prostaglandins, and prostaglandins cause contraction and relaxation of the uterus, reverse peristalsis, to suck the sperm into the fallopian tube. Like in the male, in the ovary, the liquor folliculi, when it ruptures the Graafian follicle, liquor folliculi is rich in prostaglandins, and prostaglandins act on the fimbriae, and the fimbriae undergo reverse peristalsis and suck the oocyte into the fallopian tube. Beautiful logic. Who releases the oocyte? The rupturing of the Graafian follicle releases the oocyte into the fallopian tube. So that's the first of the questions answered. Who produces ovum or egg? Rupturing of the Graafian follicle releases the ovum or the egg. And do you remember, secondary follicle and Graafian follicle have two layers, theca interna and theca externa, of which the inner layer called theca interna. Theca interna is the layer which produces the female sex hormone estrogen. Estrogen is secreted by theca interna of the secondary follicle. So two questions answered. Who releases egg? Graafian follicle. Who produces estrogen? Theca interna. So now the last question, who produces progesterone? The Graafian follicle has ruptured. The egg has been released, a phenomenon called as ovulation has taken place. As the Graafian follicle ruptures, inside the Graafian follicle, a lot of blood capillaries rupture. The Graafian follicle is full of blood vessels. It is highly vascularized. And as the Graafian follicle ruptures, blood capillaries rupture and blood gets accumulated inside the ruptured Graafian follicle, and this blood accumulated is now called as corpus hemorrhagicum. Corpus hemorrhagicum, hemorrhage has taken place. Sir, ये सुना होगा, you're driving a bike and you get a fall and you fall down, you get a hit in the brain and you are now unconscious. आपको एक CT scan के लिए लिया जाता है. Doctor takes the CT scan and tells your family he's got a brain hemorrhage. Why? There is blood inside the brain. Any internal bleeding is called hemorrhage. So here the Graafian follicle has ruptured, there is internal bleeding, and this structure is called hemorrhage, which is now called as corpus hemorrhagicum. What is the structure called? Corpus hemorrhagicum. And very soon the red blood cells of the corpus hemorrhagicum get converted into yellow color lipid rich cells, yellow color fat rich cells, and this collection of yellow color fat rich cells is a structure called as the corpus luteum. What is the collection of cells called as? Corpus luteum. And corpus luteum is a collection of yellow lipid rich cells. Golden word, corpus luteum cells start secreting the other female sex hormone, progesterone. Corpus luteum secretes progesterone. As a matter of fact, corpus luteum also secretes some amount of estrogen. So it secretes both progesterone and estrogen. So if you have understood, estrogen is secreted in the ovary twice. Progesterone is secreted once. Estrogen was first secreted by theca interna cells, and second time estrogen is secreted by corpus luteum. Progesterone is secreted only once by the corpus luteum, and both estrogen and progesterone given by corpus luteum will enter into the blood capillaries. And blood capillaries में ये hormones pass होंगे, and once the hormones pass into blood capillaries, they will enter into the mesovarium, and via mesovarium the hormones circulate in the female body and act on the uterus, on the innermost lining of the uterus. I hope you remember endometrium. So corpus luteum secretes progesterone and some estrogen which acts on the endometrium and it stimulates the endometrium. Sir, what should endometrium get stimulated for? If you remember, ovulation has taken place. The egg has been sucked into the fallopian tube and is moving with the help of cilia. Suppose at the same time, copulation takes place. The penis is inserted in the vagina, ejaculation takes place. Sperms by their zigzag movement enter into the fallopian tube and fertilize the egg to form the zygote. This zygote will move with the help of cilia, become a 16th cell structure called as the morula. The morula will drop on the endometrium, and morula will drop here. Mucus gland will give out mucus and make the morula stick to the endometrium. So mucus helps in sticking. Uterine glands in the endometrium give out uterine milk, a sugary milky fluid which acts on the morula and converts it into a fluid-filled structure called as the blastula. So who converts morula to blastula? Uterine milk. And blastula develops, now fixes into the endometrium, and that phenomenon is called implantation. At the point of implantation, the endometrial blood vessels form a bag called as the placenta, and placenta with umbilical cord provides nourishment to the fetus inside. So, तीन चीजें होती है. Mucus is given for sticking of the morula. Uterine milk is given for converting morula into a blastula. Blood vessels thicken and form the bag called placenta and umbilical cord. Who acts on blood vessels? Who acts on mucus glands? Who acts on uterine glands? All these are stimulated by progesterone and estrogen secreted by the corpus luteum. Golden words, one of the two things will happen. Ovulation has taken place, the egg is sucked into the fallopian tube, moving with the help of cilia. In the meantime, corpus luteum secretes progesterone and estrogen. Progesterone, estrogen act on the endometrium and stimulate endometrium for thickening and secretion of mucus, uterine fluid, coiling of blood vessels, thickening of endometrium. Now, egg is in the fallopian tube. Suppose copulation takes place. Suppose ejaculation takes place. And the sperm now enter the fallopian tube and fertilize the egg to form zygote. Zygote will form modula. Modula will form blastula. Will do implantation. And the endometrium will remain persistent and keep on supplying nourishment and form the future bag called placenta and umbilical cord. If fertilization and pregnancy take place, then in the ovary, the corpus luteum will persist. It will remain as it is and keep on secreting progesterone and estrogen for maintaining the endometrium intact. So pregnancy takes place. But suppose ovulation takes place and egg is in the fallopian tube, copulation does not take place, ejaculation does not take place, fertilization does not take place, the zygote is not formed, an unfertilized egg will now move with the help of cilia and this unfertilized egg drops on the endometrium. Same case of a virgin girl. Now she has not had sexual intercourse and what happens on ovulation? Unfertilized egg drops on endometrium. Then what will happen in the ovary? Within the ovary, now fertilization or pregnancy nahi hui hai because pregnancy has not taken place. The corpus luteum will now shrink, degenerate and form a white dead tissue called as the corpus albicans. Corpus albicans is the white dead tissue form, and this white dead tissue called corpus albicans stops secreting progesterone and estrogen. And as it is a dead tissue, no estrogen, progesterone secreted, now endometrium does not get stimulated. As a matter of fact, the endometrium bursts, blood vessels burst, mucus glands burst, uterine glands burst, blood, mucus, uterine milk and the unfertilized egg mix together and pass from the uterus through the vagina to the outside. I'm sure we all remember menstruation has taken place. So, golden words, if ovulation takes place, if fertilization takes place, if zygote falls in the uterus, then in the ovary, corpus luteum will persist and keeps on secreting progesterone and estrogen, and persistent corpus luteum will keep on giving progesterone and estrogen, which will maintain the endometrium, and for 9 months the endometrium will supply nourishment to the fetus. But if ovulation takes place, fertilization does not take place, unfertilized egg drops on the endometrium, then in the ovary, the corpus luteum will degenerate to form a white dead tissue called as corpus albicans, and the secretion of progesterone, estrogen will stop, and endometrium will burst, leading to a phenomenon called as menstruation takes place. Once a corpus luteum degenerates to form corpus albicans, जैसे ही menstruation हो जाता है, now the corpus albicans is a dead white tissue. From the blood vessels, WBCs will come and phagocytose the corpus albicans. सुना है WBCs phagocytose dead cells of the body. Corpus albicans is dead. So WBCs will come and phagocytose the corpus albicans, and a 28-day cycle called as the ovarian cycle ends. It started with primordial follicle, early primary follicle, late primary follicle, secondary follicle, Graafian follicle, ovulation, corpus hemorrhagicum, corpus luteum, corpus albicans. A 28-day cycle called as the ovarian cycle ends. One cycle ends, immediately a new cycle begins. Means again the pituitary gland gives out FSH, and FSH stimulates primordial follicle to become early primary follicle, late primary follicle, secondary follicle, Graafian follicle, ovulation. So ovulation takes place every 28 days, and the ovarian cycle takes place every 28 days. I'm sure you understood everything. One question now. Sir, ovarian cycle every 28 days हो रहा है, ovulation every 28 days हो रहा है. Question is, will the ovulation take place from left ovary or right ovary? There are two ovaries. स्कूल में पढ़ा था, शायद बहुत सारे टीचर्स ने आपको बताया रहेगा, ovulation takes place alternately. पहले लेफ्ट, बाद में राइट, बाद में लेफ्ट, बाद में राइट. नहीं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. You may have ovulation from left ovary, then right ovary, then right ovary, then right ovary, then left ovary, then right ovary, then left ovary, then left ovary, then left ovary. कोई भी सीक्वेंस में हो सकता है. हाँ, ovulation will take place from any of the two ovaries. From one of the two ovaries, ovulation takes place. But it happens, and such a nice thing happens, sometimes in both ovaries, two Graafian follicles are formed, and both Graafian follicles burst, and two ovulations take place. Each ovary sucks the egg with the help of the fimbriate into the fallopian tube, and if copulation, ejaculation take place, sperms enter into the left fallopian tube, sperms enter into the right fallopian tube, zygote is formed here, two zygotes form two morulas. Two morulas will drop in the uterus and become two blastulas and two babies. Congratulations, twins have been born. By the way, these were twins from two different ovulations and two different sperms. So two different zygotes, and these will be different babies. In other words, non-identical twins. Non-identical twins, which are called as fraternal twins, are born. Non-identical twins or fraternal twins are born if two ovulations, two fertilization take place simultaneously. एक दिन करेंगे how are identical twins born. Next to next lecture we'll understand that. But yes, what has been born here? Two non-identical, also called as fraternal twins have been born. And sir, this is the way the ovarian cycle takes place. Sir, two hormones given, estrogen and progesterone, what will be their function? If you remember, testosterone had made you become taller, more muscular, given you facial hair, given you aggression, attraction for females. That was testosterone. In females, estrogen and progesterone secreted will produce female secondary sexual characteristics. Which female secondary sexual characteristics? सबसे पहले, I hope you remember, last lecture, progesterone acts on the sweat glands under the nipple and help in the formation of milk-producing glands. Estrogen helps in the deposition of fats and thereby mammary glands start enlarging. Estrogen progesterone also acts on the waist, and from the waist fats are removed and deposited in the breast and the hips. तो breast में fat जाता है और hips में fat जाता है. So the waist will become narrow and the hips will become broader. So the mammary glands enlarge, the waist becomes narrow and hips become enlarged. Why should fats be removed from the hips? So if fats are removed from the hips, waist becomes narrow. When she becomes pregnant, the uterus can nicely stretch without fats obstructing the expansion of the uterus. So the waist becomes narrow for the uterus to expand. Why should the hips become broader? So that when the child is passing through the vagina, the fats will act as a buffer, will nicely give mechanical support, and the baby will smoothly pass out without rupturing of the vagina. So vagina rupture नहीं होती है, lot of fats in the buttock area protects the fetus nicely coming out. So breasts develop, the waist becomes narrow, the hips become broad, and classical puberty curves develop because of estrogen and progesterone. The voice becomes sweeter. In case of males, testosterone had made the voice become more husky. In females, estrogen, progesterone make the voice become more sweeter, more feminine. The skin becomes softer. Males say testosterone will make the skin become harder. In females, estrogen, progesterone will make the skin become softer. And now menstruation begins because of estrogen and progesterone. The uterus becomes larger, the fallopian tubes become larger, the ovaries become larger, and in the ovary, ovulation होने लगता है. In the uterus, the rupturing of endometrium, in other words, menstruation begins because of the action of estrogen and progesterone. Psychologically, remember testosterone and males become aggressive and an attraction for females had developed. Similarly, estrogen and progesterone act on the brain of a female, make her become more emotional, more sensitive, and an attraction for males will develop, and this is because of estrogen and progesterone. Sir, why are our hormones acting in different ways? That's because of nature and evolution. Nature made man and woman completely different. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That's what we say. Men are primarily made by nature to be hunters, and females are caretakers of the child. A male, because of testosterone, will become taller, stronger, so he can run after an animal and hunt. He is more aggressive, so he will be able to hunt down the animal. Skin is thicker because they are primarily hunters. And females who are more emotional, sensitive, are primarily caretakers of the child. Women are biologically superior to men. They have the power of reproduction. They can give birth to a child. Their skin is softer, so they can hold a baby. They have breast development by estrogen, progesterone, so they can breastfeed the child. Their voice is sweeter for the child to communicate with the mother, and they are more emotional and sensitive, so they are better for taking care of a small child, and that is the way our hormones have programmed us. Males as hunters, females as caretakers, and we have two different hormones, testosterone as males and estrogen, progesterone in females, and beautifully nature and evolution has played its part. So I hope you all have understood everything. Please read up this part thoroughly well. This topic is crucial for the next topic that we are doing. Very important concept, menstrual cycle. But before we do menstrual cycle, I want you all to be absolutely thorough with the histology of the ovary. Study well. God bless. Take care.